I was born in India on 20th of December 1940 in Punjab state.
Could you describe to me what that was like, the area, if you have any memories of it, or if you've been back?
I came here in 1966 and went back in 1998. So you can imagine it was a very long time since I left my country. And things were really changed. Back home, bad memories simply because I lost both parents. So the home, which was very, very busy and the happiest sort of, place, was very, very sad sort of, place to go back to, because nobody was there, empty house.
So just to take you back then, how would you describe your childhood?
My childhood was very, very happy, the happiest I can remember. Always something to do, going to school, coming back home. We were 5 sisters and 1 brother, and one of my cousin used to live with us as well, because she lost her father and she couldn't get education, so my father literally adopted her. And after school we used to play cards, carom board, while mom and dad used to rest, and then we used to sort of have real fun. Evenings, again after doing our homework, we will always play badminton. Mom and dad used to join us. So it was a family where everybody enjoyed together. Very, very close family.
Very good. And how many brothers and sisters did you have?
We were 5 sisters and 1 brother.
Okay. And so did you received an education in school or at home? What was that like?
Father being in the army, we used to sort of, it was a gypsy life, going from one place to another. And my father worked with the British Army, and he was a very, very liberal person, and so was my mother. And during those days, girls' education wasn't welcomed, and nobody used to send their daughters to for higher education. But my parents, they said to us that education is the only thing which gives you confidence, which will give you better life. Though we used to think that, oh, they are just talking something which doesn't mean anything, but now we realize that they were right. And when they sent my eldest sister to college, she was the first girl in the college, and the whole family opposed it, from my mother's side and my father's side. But my father said that I don't care, but I want the best for my children. So once she went there, I think there were only 3 girls in the college. By the time I went to college, there were number increased to such an extent that you could see girls everywhere. So our parents gave us the best thing, which was education.
So would you say it was frowned upon sort of for women to get education in India before that? And was it very difficult sort of to change things?
It was very, very difficult, especially in villages. In big cities, the life was different. The rich people, their children always had the best, education, best life. But with the middle class people and the working class people, it was a totally different life. So the girls were not allowed to have education. Therefore, it was a start in 50s. I would say that it was a start of where the women started, having education.
Okay. And what place did religion have in your family?
Well, religion didn't have much place in our family. My father didn't believe in religion. My mother was very religious, but having large family, she never had time to go to temple or sort of have any religious ceremonies in the house. But at the same time, she was very honest, truthful, virtuous woman, and we have learned a lot from my mother and my father, because though he didn't believe in religion, but he believed in truth, respect of other people, and also he taught us that we should respect other human beings as we should expect, the respect from other people. Therefore, though he didn't believe in religion, but I think deep in heart he was very religious.
Yeah. And you mentioned before that he's very liberal. Was that very different compared to other people in the community?
Exactly, he was. Now I can see that, because when we were young we didn't differentiate that, but now we can understand that. After retirement, when we settled in our village, we had so much freedom in our family that we could go to school, we could go to college, we could do anything. In college we used to take part in extracurricular activities, dramas, sports, debates, anything. We were there. But compared to my two uncles, my father's brothers' families, it was so different, because the girls there didn't have the same privileges what we had. So, and comparing ourselves with the rest of the people in the village or area around us, we felt that we had out of this world life compared to the other people, especially the girls.
I see. And so how then do you think that the infrastructure, be that for sort of welfare, education or health in India, was different to England?
Yes, it was totally different. For example, education was free here, but back at home, you have to pay for everything, books, fees, clothes. You can imagine that education was very, very expensive. The health, you have to pay for everything. Again, if somebody's sick, then you have to pay for medicines, for doctor's fees and everything. So all these, there was no free thing for you. Everything you required, education, housing, health, you have to pay for everything.
Do you think that these were political concerns for people? Do you think that people felt that there should be more sharedness of education, of everything, or in your family? Was there a political awareness?
Yes, I think my father was very political. Although he would never show or tell anybody who he actually, once he went to cast his vote, and my mother went as well, and it was hilarious when he came back. My brother said to Dad, who did you vote for? And he said, it's my business, not yours, to know who I voted for. But at the same time, he every morning, he will get the Tribunal, the national newspaper. He will read, from one page to the other, the whole newspaper. And he used to tell us about the political issues. And my mother was very, very aware of the especially local issues, which gave us awareness that, yes, women have the right to sort of participate in the local issues. And especially when we were out, when father was still in the army, she used to join any ladies' clubs, and she will go out and they will have fun, learn from each other, cooking and sewing, these sort of things. They used to years ago, which we have witnessed when we were young. So seeing her, watching her, taking part in these sort of small groups, we naturally learned that mingling with other people and having more friends, you learn more.
I see. And so, sort of taking you back to when you had your first job and your education followed by your job, what was it that you did first of all?
Well, I did my teacher's training from Punjab University, and my first job was teaching in a secondary school, and it was a boys' school, so it was a big challenge because by nature the boys are very, very sort of cheeky, and when I first started to teach, I was told by the head teacher that you are heading towards trouble. We will see if you can control the boys. And I said, okay, I'll try. So they gave me the most difficult sort of class, second year. And luckily, with my own sort of techniques I learned from when we were out in different places, different countries, and observing how our parents used to tackle different problems. I controlled that class, and my principal couldn't believe that. So it was very short employment, because after that, after 6 months or 8 months, I got married. So I had to give up that job. I've thoroughly enjoyed it and felt very proud that I could control those kids. And the only way I could do that, I didn't show my authority. I tried to be a part of that group, bringing myself to that level. And this is what they liked. Instead of being scared, as in India, the students are always very, very scared of their teachers. But they were not scared, they were rather friends. And this is how I really enjoyed that job. I still miss that.
And so, what was your perception of England and the Western world before you came here?
I think the immigration during that period was, there was a lot of recruitment going on in Punjab and other parts of the country for Asian people to go to, rather come to England, and there were lots of jobs available, better life, and we all used to dream of sort of coming to England. I think it was every girl's dream those days to go abroad. The perception was that in England you get everything, is a wonderful life, lot of money, you have cars, house, anything you need in your life, you'll get it in England.
So were you very optimistic at the possibility?
Very, very optimistic, yes.
Okay. And so, how did you initiate the process then? How did it all begin to come together, your sort of migration?
My marriage was arranged, and my husband was in England 3 years prior to going back to India and looking for a bride, and somebody, one of the family friends suggested that this lad has come from England. He's tried to sort of draw a beautiful picture of his background and everything, and my mother was very, very keen, and she said, well, he's from England, you will have better life there if you go there. And marriage was arranged, so we got married in 1966, and I lived in his village I think for 6 months. He left, and he said that he will send me the necessary papers, and when I get all the immigration clear, then I will be able to join him. So that was another experience, from very well-educated family. I went into a family where people were not highly educated, but I really enjoyed that bit as well, simply because there were things that I couldn't do in my family, simply milking the cows, going into the fields and doing sort of, work in the field. I wasn't allowed in my family, but I enjoyed it because my in-laws expected that of me, that I should be doing everything, from cleaning, tidying up, washing up, cooking, feeding the cattle, and I loved it. And that was the best part of my life, apart from the intellectual level, that was lacking, but at the same time, spinning the wheel, I loved it.
So you took on board your role in marriage, and you enjoyed your role in marriage. Yeah. Okay, and so then, when did you migrate? What date was that?
That was September '66 when I came over to this country.
And where did you go first of all?
I lived in London, Stratford. The day I landed in England, I looked around and I said to myself, when we were living in big cities, it's not much different. And my perception of England was that it's always cold, it's always snowing there. And in September, it was beautiful sunshine. And I couldn't believe that. That was the first sort of, shock to me, that there's the sunshine in England. Unbelievable. And my sister and my brother-in-law and my husband came to pick me up from the airport. We had a lovely meal in my sister's house in Slough. And again, I was really amazed that it was Indian food. So that was another thing, I said, oh, you can get Indian food, in England. And she said, yeah, of course you can get anything. So then I was dropped with my husband in our house. And that was the biggest shock. A really, really big shock to me, because my perception was that he had his own house and his own car. But there was nothing like that. It was a big house, and the landlord and landlady, they were there to receive us. They did all the religious ceremony, as any parent would do to their new daughter-in-law. And then I was showed my room, which was about 12 by 12, and that was my living accommodation, with a little kitchen, shared toilet, shared bathroom. Although I didn't mind that, because the landlord and landlady they were fantastic. They played parents' role to me and gave me all sorts of love and care. But at the same time, I used to think, where's that car I always dreamed of? Where's that house I always dreamed of? And my husband wasn't very keen on these things. He had very laid-back sort of, life. Okay, good work, come back home. There's a wife who should cook, clean, tidying up, and do everything. Very traditional person. And that was quite shocking to me.
What job did your husband do?
He worked in a plastic molding factory, something like this. It was a labouring job.
And would you say that his lifestyle was very different to yours?
Totally different.
What did he do? Just sort of.
He didn't believe in husband and wife relationship is, going out together, staying at home, doing things together. His perception of family life was that he will go to work, bring his wage, and he had played his role, and the rest is totally woman's sort of responsibility to look after children, look after the house, do all the shopping, cooking. By the evening, he will get ready. His friends will call him, and they will go to the pub. And that was the time when I used to feel very, very sad and lonely. But he didn't understand that his wife needed him as well. And that pattern, I think, went throughout until we separated.
So would you have said that life was very hard for you, sort of in the home and generally?
It was very, very hard to manage with 2 children in a small room. And not only that, I felt very isolated as well. Having no friends around, and I wasn't introduced to anybody who had the same sort of intellectual level as myself. So I used to feel, what I'm doing now, wasting my life here. But at the same time, I was very, very dedicated mother. I'm still very dedicated mother and grandmother now. So I enjoyed looking after my children. I loved them to bits. So when I used to take my children to clinic, I used to see other Asian mothers there who couldn't speak a word of English. And the health visitor used to use me to do the interpreting. So I used to get trapped in doing these sort of jobs. And this is where I found out there are so many people, especially women living in England, who cannot speak a word of English, and yet they have to go out and use the services without expressing themselves, expressing their needs. And I felt very sad for them. And I used to feel really good helping them, doing interpreting and doing small jobs for them.
So you began to be involved in helping other people of the community.
Yeah.
What other things did you do? What else? How did that process come about?
Well, while I was in London, I didn't do much, simply because I had 2 very young children. And I was very, very sad. Deep in heart, I always missed my background. So I think it was 3 years later, I went back to India. And by that time, I lost my mother, and my father was still around. When I went back, I didn't feel like coming back to England at all. So my father was a bit suspicious that I wasn't very happy, but I didn't tell him in words, but he suspected that. It was a year and a half that I stayed back at home with my parents and occasionally visiting my in-laws. My husband wrote a second letter in a year and a half, very brief, that I've got a house now and I'm sending you the ticket for yourself and children. Please come back. And by that time he moved to Wolverhampton. My eldest sister was living in Wolverhampton. So I thought maybe it will change my life, because now we've got our own house. So I came back. Another mistake. That was in 1971.
Did you feel more prepared for life in England when you came back?
I was, yes. I was more prepared. I thought, well, I've got my own house, so I can have more freedom with my own life and with my children. And by that time, I had my third child as well, and another girl. So I returned to England in 71.
And when did you get your first job then, or begin to be involved in?
My first job was in 1974, and that was again another experience of life that I didn't have much knowledge of the welfare system, education system, or employment system in this country. So I used to have one friend who was working as a doctor's secretary. She was from Delhi, and I said to her that, look, my life is becoming impossible at home, and most of the women worked in small sewing factories, and my husband used to say that, look, other women are working, they're earning their sort of livelihood. You think you are educated, you can't even find a job. So there was always challenge, making me feel that I can't do anything. Eventually, I felt that, yes, I should go out and find a job. And that was a challenge to me. But I didn't know what to do, to find a job. So I said to my friend, come on, can you help me to go to employment office? We didn't even know where the employment office was. We ended up in social services office. So one of the social workers who knew me, because his wife was teaching my youngest daughter, he came out. He knew about our problems, family problems. He thought I had a problem with my husband. So he came out and he said, are you all right, Gurmeet? I said, yes, I'm fine, but we didn't know where the employment office is. So he took his time off and he took us to the employment office. And a young white girl interviewed me. She asked me all sorts of questions about my background, my education. And her comment was, she said, oh, Mrs. Kaur, you speak excellent English. And she said, well, you have to take a very sort of, simple test. And then I will recommend what you can do. So it was a spelling test, which I passed. And she said to me, although she knew that I was a qualified teacher, she said, the only thing I can advise you is to go to the college and do typing course, secretarial course. And I was very, very upset, very confused why I have to do secretarial course when I can do better. But I had no choice. And she said to me that, oh, you will be getting, I can't remember, how much money was for training. And I was paid about £5, £6, £7 a week. Went to college, Bilston College, and started my training, leaving my children with my friends. It was the most distressing time in my life. Taking 2 children to school, the youngest to my friend, and then walking all the way to Bilston College. I couldn't afford to go by bus. And in college, whenever I started typing and listening to all the instructions, tears flowing on my cheeks, where did I end up? I was all right, happy teaching in a secondary school. Am I going to be a secretary? What sort of place? I was very scared, extremely scared. And coming back into very violent sort of, household, it was extremely confusing for me. So eventually, while I was doing this course, my tutors were very happy with my progress. And one day my tutor, one very first tutorial group, she asked me several questions, and I was very upset. And she said, what happened? So I told her the whole story, what is happening at home, and I love my children and I can't leave them with other people. I still can hear my little girl, screaming for mommy. She didn't want to stay with my friend. And she said, Kermit, you got all these qualifications, so you don't need to this training secretarial course. And I said, Mrs. Tuval, I can still remember her name. She was quite sort of, old. And she said to me, you have other opportunities. I said, well, I wanted to hear that, but nobody gave me any guidance. She said, if you want to go for teaching, you have to do 2 years training, which I couldn't do because 2 years is a long time with children. And I think it was only 3 months in that job that she called me in her office one day and she said, Kermit, there is a job going on in community relations office. It's a receptionist job. Would you be interested? I said, I'm not sure about that. But she said, look, it's my advice, you go for that, and then hopefully with some experience working with people, you will have other opportunities. I listened to her advice. I went for an interview and filled the application form. The following day, I had a phone call, and it used to be Keith Elder who interviewed me. He said, you got the job. So I was over the moon. I thought, well, that's great, I got an office job. I wanted to prove to my husband as well that, yes, I can get a job. But at the same time, I wasn't very happy with this receptionist job, but I thought, well, something is better than nothing. So I went to this job, and actually the community relations officer, the chief officer, he was away during that time. And when he returned, he talked to me, and he said, I looked at your application, you got these qualifications, would you like to do a different job? And I felt, I could hear Mrs. Duval's words that you will get other opportunities. And I said, yes, I'm quite interested. And he said, all right, from now on, you will be the assistant community relations officer, and your job will be to start with, you have to start with this project with Asian women. And this is how it all started.
And so, just to recap, would you say that there was a lot of sort of institutional sort of racism and lack of understanding of your background and qualifications at the time? How did you find it difficult to overcome that?
There were so many hurdles. I wasn't aware of the racism at that time because I had no knowledge, what I was heading towards. And I wasn't very aware of the local or the national politics. But all the hurdles I had to sort of, overcome. Then I realized that it was, for example, when I was interviewed by this employment officer, a young lady who couldn't, it must be stereotyped that all the Indians, they are uneducated, the only jobs they should be doing is the receptionist or typing or secretarial job, and they shouldn't be doing better jobs. Which I then realized once I became Assistant Community Relations Officer, and then I was more aware of the Race Relations Act. Then I started feeling, that I was misguided from day one. But at the same time, I felt maybe this is what I was destined to do. And this is how I compromised with myself, that maybe, this is the job for me, to work with the Asian women and improve their, lives.
Institutional forms of racism and how much that was a barrier, sort of, to just everything, just from your own experiences and getting a job and setting up. And prior to that, we were talking about sort of domestic difficulties and how there was a few battles fought there. Do you think they were more difficult than the institutional racism?
Domestic problems
Yeah.
compared to racism is totally different. Although it's affecting your performance in daily life, also make you feel you are not worthwhile person. You lose confidence. But at the same time, when you are at the home front, you have families around. They rally around you, they help you morally, and give you financial help, physical help. Any problem you have, I had my family around. I believe including his own family always took my side, simply because they knew that he wasn't doing the right thing. With the institutionalized racism, you feel you're alone. You're fighting on your own. For example, when I moved to social services, my caseload compared to my other colleagues was double. And my own supervisor, she felt it wasn't fair. But at the same time, I was the only Asian social worker who was, although there were few more Asian social workers, but I was the only one who was specialist in dealing with Asian families. She wrote to the director once that I do need some assistance. No response. Then I realized, my colleagues, we were talking about, expenses, because by that time I was living on my own with 3 children, that I was finding it difficult to cope, financially. And one of my colleagues said, what scale you are on, Gurmit? I said, I told her, what scale I was on. I said, I don't believe that. I said, why? She said, well, I'm unqualified social worker. I had no formal qualifications. I'm on a level 2, on qualified social worker level. Why you are not on the same level? And I suddenly realized, because we have never time to look into that we are not paid the same level as the white counterparts. We were not sort of, given the same facilities as other people working around us. Then I realized that I was paid far less than other unqualified social workers. Whenever I said that I should have the pay rise, my principal officer said I should go for formal qualifications, only then you can progress. But my fight and then started with the department, which took nearly 10 years to make them realize that I was doing the same level of work, child abuse, domestic violence, any housing problem, homelessness, whatever. I was doing exactly the same work what the qualified social workers were doing. But simply because I had my teaching qualifications and not CQSW, which was the qualified social work qualifications, I was paid far less. And eventually in 1992, they gave me the real, the proper level of pay which qualified social workers were getting. But it took me 10 years. Now you can imagine that I felt that my seniors, my department, they were responsible to look at my work, level of my responsibility, which was far more than the other social workers. I was paid far less. And that sort of things, we never realized that this is what I feel until somebody else told me that, no, you are paid less than me. And that was, again, Western 3 social workers who were unqualified, working in the same section. They were paid higher level than me. I then realized that, yes, that's not fair. And then I realized that it's not just me, there are other people who are going through the same difficulties, not being recognized that they had their qualifications back at home and they had their experience working in this country, and they are not treated on the same level as other people are. So that was much more difficult because I didn't have any positive response from my seniors. With domestic problems, I had people who, whenever I had a problem, and ring my sisters or my relatives, they were there within no time to come and help me. So you can tell there was difference between family problems and the institutionalized racism.
Going into your experience of social work, do you think there was a lot of misunderstanding of the grassroots issues for Asian women? And could you sort of elaborate on some of those issues?
There was a lot of problems whenever I try to raise issues concerning women's problems. The very common comment I always heard from seniors and other colleagues and other professionals, while they're in England, why don't they follow the English traditions? And these English traditions were that if an English woman is having problems, marital problems, she will leave and start her new life. Why can't Asian women do the same? And every time I had to explain to everyone the reason why we don't leave just like that. Well, first of all, the whole family tries to bring better understanding between couples. And culturally, this is not acceptable. A woman leaving home or leaving husband is not acceptable at all, because if I had left my husband when I started to have problems, people would have treated me as a bad woman, because virtuous women, they don't go against cultural traditions. So this was the biggest hurdle, the cultural awareness. I remember going to one of the solicitors, because women who wanted to leave homes and take legal action, I had to sort of go to the solicitors, do interpreting for my clients. And one of the solicitors said to me, why she's not going for divorce? Why judicial separation? It's a waste of taxpayers' money. That made me think, why he's so worried about taxpayers' money, he's not willing to learn or listen to her problem. Judicial separation means she's still married to that man, but she wants to try to have a breathing space. And if things do work between husband and wife, there's a possibility for them to go back together. And when I heard that, I never took my clients to their solicitors, although I tried to explain to him, why she's not taking divorce proceedings, why she's taking judicial separation. And I found other firms who were more understanding, willing to learn about the cultural implications. And there were 3-4 firms where the solicitors learned quite a lot from my cases, and they were marvelous to deal with my clients. So these are the sort of things, same with the colleagues, half the time I was teaching, fighting with indigenous, people, why we're doing it so differently. And on the other hand, I was fighting my own community, why I'm helping these women, because they didn't want me to help these women. They thought I was encouraging them to leave their families. So you can imagine I was in a dilemma, that I was having my own problems, having sometimes, occasionally, my husband did physically beat me up, and going to office, having a client who was subject of domestic violence with all the visible bruising. I had to hold her hand and say, well, don't worry, I will help you. Leave everything on me. I'm here to help you. And deep in heart, I used to feel sort of, the way the woman was crying. I felt like crying myself. But I had to sort of, hide all my emotions, all my problems, and I used to appear as I was, my marriage was perfect, no problems within my own family. And having given these services to those women who were who really needed my help, they respect me not as a human being. They think I was a goddess who appeared in time to help them, to take them out of very, very, sometimes extremely bad situations. So you can imagine that I was in a dilemma where I had to educate my people that they should not repeat this domestic violence, because this is not on. You can talk, you can communicate with each other without raising hand. Same time, I was educating my own colleagues and people in the wider community, especially when I used to go out talking to lots of indigenous, women's groups. And I used to tell them how wonderful our community is. At the same time, I had to highlight these problems, and my community didn't like it at all. So at times, there used to be press statements, which, especially when there was a young girl who was murdered in Wolverhampton, husband strangled her, and press wanted me to make a statement. And I did say with my utmost sincerity that the reason this young man strangled his wife is he was trapped into this cultural cage, and his marriage was forced and not arranged. And I always said that there's a difference in arranged marriage and forced marriage. And this young man had no other way out but to kill his wife. And when I made this statement, there was so much anger within my community. And my husband used to get very angry simply because when he used to go to pubs, and all the people will point out at him that it's your wife who's causing all the trouble. She shouldn't be making these sort of statements. And he used to get very angry, come home and take it on me that I shouldn't be saying such things, or I shouldn't be sort of doing this job. I rather do a secretarial job with staying within the 4 walls instead of going out and working with the community. But at the same time, my children gave me moral support. Mom, you are saying everything right, so you shouldn't be scared of telling the truth.
How did you feel when you took this criticism from people? Did it anger you?
At times, I used to feel quite frustrated, and especially when there are lots of people who didn't want to see me in that role. And I used to have threatening letters, very nasty letters, nasty phone calls. They're going to burn my house, or they're going to sort of break the windows, or make all sorts of allegations, writing to my director that I'm not doing my job properly. Although it caused lots of emotional problems, but it gave me more strength to fight back, because deep in my heart I knew that I was doing the right thing. So all that negative criticism gave me more strength to fight back.
And by the same token, you also got acknowledgement for the battles that you fought, such as I saw a file that you showed me, which saw that you'd been for a meal with the Queen, for instance. And were there other acknowledgements in the community of your battle?
I think that was a reward for all the hard work I did. Although I said to many people that I didn't do everything on my own. There were other people who were working in the same field, who supported me, who helped me. Many Asian and Afro-Caribbean social workers, they always gave me moral support. There were police, there was probation officers, some of my own people who supported me as well, that yes, Gurmit, you are doing the right thing. I think all this support, moral support, gave me strength. And eventually, I don't know who put my name forward, but I had a wonderful sort of meal, luncheon with her Majesty the Queen and Duke of Edinburgh, who was sitting next to me, and he didn't let me eat anything, but he kept asking me all sorts of questions. I don't know whether he still remembers that or not, but it was a wonderful experience. So only 7 people were actually in the palace.
Okay, so I think we get this impression that you're a very civic person, and you've done a lot for the community. How important is community to you?
I don't know. I'm very dedicated. If I start something, I always take it seriously, and the reason I take it seriously is that I know I'm fighting for the good cause. People are very important, not just the Asian community, but anybody who needs help. It's always my nature, which I think I learned from my parents, that if there is somebody who needs your help, you should go out and help these people. And this is how I felt that when I first started, I learned more and more and more about people's needs, particularly people who couldn't understand the language, people who didn't understand the politics, local politics. They didn't understand that they are equal in terms of receiving services. They had the full rights to education, housing, and employment. But because of lack of education, lack of information, they were not enjoying all these facilities. Therefore, we started different projects to inform our communities. Although it's very small sort of area we are covering, but there needs to be more people to come forward and do this sort of work to make people aware of their rights, to take part in local issues and also in national issues. So I am still interested in women's groups, still developing women's groups, although I'm retired 7 years ago, but I think 70% of my time is spent outside the house helping people, developing these groups, and the rest of the time is spent with my grandchildren and my own family. So I believe that being taxpayers, being ratepayers, we should know exactly where we stand. And this is the information I'm trying to give to the community as a whole. And I'm getting a lot of support from different directions. Although at the moment it's only a small group, we are hoping to recruit more people from the ethnic minorities who can be spokespeople, who can speak on behalf of our people and fight for their rights.
And how important do you think it is to teach English people and white people?
We talk about stereotypes, we talk about racism, we talk about differences. And there are differences of all levels, we cannot resolve this problem unless people from all sides, black, white, and European, the indigenous people, unless we have proper information, proper education, and everybody in schools, it should start in schools. Until we do that, we will never be able to resolve this problem.
And do you think that things are getting better then?
It is getting better very slowly, very, very slowly. Because when I first started in '74, you can imagine, and I used to go around to different groups, the indigenous groups, talk about the Asian culture, Asian background, why we need different sort of services, and I used to feel I've done a good job, and I used to feel that it'll make a little bit difference in the attitudes of these people I've talked to. But this is 21st century, and I still feel that there's a lot need to be doing. So there's very little difference, although the new government is trying to bring better understanding and trying to introduce much more stricter Race Relations Act. But it cannot be practiced until the people on the higher ranks have the will to implement these race relations, acts, and also they have education themselves about the equal rights, equal opportunities. And the same thing in schools, it has to start from schools. The teachers' education, the governor's education, the children then will automatically follow, as long as these people start talking about equal opportunities, that we are equal. We are here, we are the citizens of this country, and we are making contribution in the economic and social life. Then why shouldn't we have the same rights?
Okay, and moving on to sort of you mentioned that you've raised a family here, and now that you've actually got another generation of grandchildren, and what are the important lessons to teach to those children?
I have always talked to my children very openly, about the family affairs, how the families should be, all the religious side as well, that we should respect every human being, no matter who they are. And I'm very happy that my children are very open-minded. They are half Western and half Asian, which is a mixture of both cultures. And I admire them that they respect both cultures. Now my grandchildren, hopefully, they will grow up. I'm still, working with them. And the reason why I took early retirement was that I wanted to be with my grandchildren because I couldn't be with my own children. Give them better education, and also teach them the right things. So every book I choose, every film I choose for my grandchildren, I do it very carefully, that it doesn't teach them anything which brings racism in their mind. They should learn that all people are God's people. And I'm very proud that my granddaughter, who is 7, she always asks me these sort of questions. Grandma, why you're doing this? Then I explain to her why I'm doing all this, community work. The little one says, Grandma, why you have to go out? She is only 3. What you doing in the center? I love your center, he says, because he gets so much love from Asian Women's, Center. There are about 50 women who sit around, talk about their problems, or they just talk social issues. And he's a little one running around, and every elderly woman is his grandmother. So he has to address them as grandmother. And he loves that. All that attention, he loves it. And this is how the children, Asian children, learn that everybody is a family, not outsider. They get love, they get all sorts of attention, and this is how I teach my children. And anybody who comes in contact with me, I remember one young white child. I was walking through the street to catch bus, and he said to me, "Hey, Paki," and I said, "Hello, my child. Shall I tell you, I'm not Paki. I'm Indian. And I've come from India." And that child looked at my face. He was really surprised that I could speak English. And I believe that that child may not have called anybody else Paki, because I spoke to him with love. And I tried to sort of, give him the right information, which other people might have sort of, answered him back very violently. But this is not the way to teach other people.
Thank you very much. I think that's a good note on which to sort of round up this